Citizens of the world, welcome back to another Keep Yours podcast where we try and keep a few more dollars in your pocket. I'm going to do another video this week on the PPP program, but today I think it's much more important that we talk about what's going on in America right now. And just as we sort of interrupted our regular scheduled program to do COVID series, it seems appropriate now to address racism in America. And while I am a white person and I'm a financial expert, these intertwine quite a bit. And the question came up from one of my good friends, Kara, and I'll just read you her Facebook post. Truth. I didn't want to watch the George Floyd video. I couldn't believe that a police officer would recklessly cause the death of a person in such a way. Then last night, I went for a walk at almost dark in my predominantly white neighborhood in Lincoln, Nebraska. When I asked myself the question, would my black or brown friends feel safe enough to do the same walk at the same time that I'm doing? What I came back with was probably not. I watched the video today. My heart hurts even more. Now what to do about it? Besides check in with my friends, continue to be vigilant against and aware of injustice, donate to the cause, sure. Vote, absolutely. Run for political office, not my calling. What else? What else? It took me a while to think about that. But for many of you who listen to me know how my brain works. A police officer with his knee on the neck of a person is in and of itself a problem, but it is not the problem. It is a symptom of much, much, much bigger, much deeper rooted problems. And what else we need to do is on the long term is change these things that cause systemic racism, these things that allow systemic racism to continue and perpetuate throughout our society. And a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are not things that people mostly want to talk about. But Kara posed the question perfectly. What else can I really do? And after I thought about that for a while, like all problems we want to solve, the first thing we got to do is admit the problem exists. Now, I know racism exists because I know racist people. There are people that I've come across in my life that are 100%, without a doubt, racist. The words they use are racist words. I know racism is about ignorance. If we scanned 10 different bodies after death of 10 different people from around the world, most of us could go in a medical lab and look at their muscles. We couldn't tell the difference. You don't go in a cadaver lab. If you didn't see the skin on the person, you wouldn't know if they were white or black or brown. You wouldn't know if they were Indian or Asian. You might guess based on height. If you were an epidemiologist, maybe some bone structure things that might be somewhat related to race may come out, but that's no guarantee. Under the skin, we are all the same. Everyone's got a liver and 2 kidneys and a heart. No one's different because of their skin color. We don't have a different genus. We're all Homo sapiens. Bruce Lee said it. Martin Luther King said it. We're all the same. We all want to be identified as part of the human race. We all want to be treated based on the conduct of our character, not the color of our skin. Now, most of the problems that I see are class problems. It just so happens to be that almost all of the people of color in America are affected by the class problems because there's systemic racism and injustice that prevents most of them from jumping up. And when they do, they become often part of the problem. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So if we're going to change this, we've got to change ignorance, which is a really tough one to do. right? How do you change ignorance? And ignorance does not have to be a derogatory term. We're all ignorant of many different things. I'm ignorant of how the hell we just put people into space, of how the hell a rocket actually works, of how Elon Musk could get a rocket to then land so he could reuse it again when no one else has done that. I'm ignorant of all of those things. But those also aren't things that I need to know about to be a good citizen in the U.S. Class issues are race issues. And then we use racism to prevent the classes from coming together. So if we want to change these problems, what do we need to do? The first thing we need to do is change laws of morality. While laws of morality sound good, we've tried them before and we'll keep trying them again, they create the opportunity for discretion. And discretion is the last thing that you really want to have happen from a police officer, because that's how racism is perpetuated. If you haven't read the book Chasing the Scream, I highly recommend it. It's a must read on how our laws against drugs are waging a war against ourselves. We have a war on drugs in America. So we say, a war on drugs. But we have legal prescription drugs. And when I pull up these stats, they're going to blow your mind. It is crazy. So while certain drugs are illegal in America, if you get it from a pharmacy, it's legal. Do we put those drug dealers in jail? No. In fact, they are contributing large amounts of money to the Met and all sorts of other places where everyone thinks, oh, that Sackler family, they're actually really nice, good people. No, they're not. They're really shitty drug dealers who have lied and got tons of people addicted to drugs in America. Opiates and heroin are the same thing. Because you get one at from a pharmacy and one you get on the street does not mean they don't derive from the same poppies. The poppies in Afghanistan that we don't help farmers plant, but we kind of do help farmers plant them because it's actually illegal for us to help them grow crops that would make them other money. It's not really a choice over there. So we've perpetuated. More drugs are coming out of Afghanistan than when we went into Afghanistan. And a lot of those drugs went right back up onto our shores. That's just the way that it goes. So that's true. That's what happens. Okay? You want to look at some of these things? I'm going to show you. Bureau of Drug Statistics Crime Department. Okay? So look at who we're arresting. What are we arresting? We're arresting people who are in possession of drugs, right? This is because this is what the cops are out doing all of the time. This is how systemic racism is pushed. We're not arresting people who are really dealing the drugs at any higher rate. Those arrests have been static, right? Yes, they want a few of them, and the police departments pretend that they want a few of them. But what do they really want? They just want their numbers, right? What do prosecutors want? 100% prosecution rate, not 100% justice rate. Notice the difference, right? We have a war on drugs. But what does that mean? That means that right now, we're arresting people, putting them into jail. Do we think they come out reformed? Destined to live a better life, free of all drugs in their life after that? Oh, come on. Instead, what do we have? We've got drug dealers and cops both on the same side agreeing the same thing. We want drugs illegal. Why? Because then the cops get to play their game and keep buying their equipment and hire more police. And the drug dealers and organized crime organizations get to continue to grow and make billions and billions of dollars. And meanwhile, where is the fallout from that? Where do we see the violence from that? We have so much violence in America, mostly perpetuated because of our war against ourselves, right? Meanwhile, when it comes to opioids, this is astounding. Okay, this is a lot of what we need to do is educate ourselves on what's going on in our own country. We pretend like we know. We pretend like bad people do drugs. But look at this. This is not from some place that just made it up. This is from the Center for Disease Control. This is their information. This is their website. The key highlights: steady increase in national opioid Read heroin prescribing rate started in 2006. It peaked in 2012 at 225 million prescriptions. That is 81.3 prescriptions per 100 persons in the United States. That is correct. 81.3% of American citizens got a drug opiate prescription in 2012 alone. That is just that year. So we do not have a war on drugs, or 81% of American citizens would not have a prescription for what is legal heroin. Wake up, America. This is what we need to talk about. This is a massive, massive problem. And it is not going to be treated by... Are we going to shove 81.3% of people in jail because they did heroin? Oh, wait, it's legal heroin. And then what happens when we get people addicted to heroin? Because we're handing out prescriptions to 81% of people. Are we telling everybody that these are highly addictive drugs? Okay, if we were telling the doctors these were highly addictive drugs, then the doctors would be a lot more concerned. Remember that Hippocratic oath, do no harm. Putting people on drugs that are highly addictive does a lot of harm. And then once they're addicted, what do? Do we have a treatment program for them? Do we have classes for them to attend that help? Do we pre-look at, hey, how many of these 81% of people are going to be at high risk for a developing addiction? No, we don't look at any of those things. Hand it out. Go do it. We run pill mills where pharmacies dispense more pills than everyone in the city could possibly take. So this is how a lot of drug addiction starts. A lot of people start on legal drugs. And then a lot of these people end up on street drugs. And now we have a huge problem with our emergency services in America dealing with a heroin epidemic caused by our legal drug companies. Then we want to say we have a war on drugs. Then we're going to put those people in jail when they got addicted off a prescription from a doctor. We figured out that cannabis use is bullshit. That illegal cannabis use is terrible. Oh yeah, and by the way, cannabis has been in husbandry with people for thousands of years. Proof. Here you go. Cannabis residue found in Jewish temples links, and they want to call it a hallucinogenic, but I'm going to tell you that cannabis is not really a hallucinogen. You don't hallucinate on cannabis. That's not really what happens. But from 800 BC, all right? So that's 3,000 years ago. Cannabis was already in use and has been since then, okay? So these are not new things into the world that we need to prevent everyone from having. In fact, they were used in religious ceremonies. So how does a religious ceremonial drug that farmers in the United States were paid to grow hemp for the war effort to make materials for the war in the 1940s, all of a sudden becomes the number one thing people get arrested for in the 1990s? Does this make sense? And let's make no mistake about it. This is not party affiliation nonsense. Bill Clinton did worse. The Democrats did worse for everybody. They perpetuated this problem. Yeah, Nixon started it. Reagan amped it up. Bush amped it up some more. We're going to fund more and more police. We're tough on crime. Well, if we've made all of us criminals, 81% of people got a prescription just in 2012. So if we were really that concerned that this was a drug and no one should touch it, then doctors wouldn't be legally prescribing it. So let's get over our bullshit about what's really happening in America, what this war on drugs is really about. This is about pharmaceutical companies who don't want legal drugs, things that come from plants, to be used. Psilocybin is a mushroom that grows out of shit. Literally, that's how it gets here. Spores are all over the place. You can't control it. You can't eradicate it. Hemp grows they call it weed for a reason, people. It grows in ditches. It's everywhere. We're going to eradicate it? We tried prohibition in the 20s. What did it do? What did prohibition get us? It got us crooked cops who are now attached to the drug gangs, and it got us the biggest increase in drug gangs in American history. It created organized crime, organized around prohibition. And I don't care what your prohibition thing is. You don't want gambling, you got underground gambling halls. You don't want prostitution, you have underground prostitution rings and human trafficking. Is that better than the legal prostitution that they have in Germany, the Netherlands, in Nevada? I don't think so. Right? What do you want to make illegal? All you do is force it underground and create a criminal element. And then you create the police that are going along with it. Oh, yeah, police officers in Boston that are attached to a prostitution ring. Big surprise. Cops attached to gambling rings. Big surprise. Cops attached to drug rings. Big surprise. Of course it does. There's so much money involved. Why can it not? And so instead of this money flowing through the economy legally, it doesn't. And instead, what do? We use these prohibitions to decide who we're going to arrest and what punishment we're going to prescribe upon them. And that is how we get institutional racism. And then you get into the criminal justice system, and institutional racism becomes a huge class issue. Because if you are arrested, now first, you need to make bail. So, if you're of a class that doesn't have money, if you are lower class, if you're poor, you don't have money for bail. And you sure as shit don't have money for a lawyer. So in law, your criminal justice system is only fair, and even at that it's not fair, if you have the money to defend yourself and pay for a lawyer. How many people have that? If it actually comes down to it, if they actually want to put you in jail, how many people really have the resources to pay attorneys who cost $400 to $500 an hour to defend you? And make no mistake, it's the same in business. Companies do this all the time. You want to see the latest one? Yeah, watch that blood doping documentary on Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes, who should be in jail. Not for necessarily, she should be in jail for multiple reasons. First of all, lying to everybody that her machines actually worked, but for what she did to her employees, where they came out to tell the truth, and she used every possible legal measure to prevent them from speaking out against it. And we're talking about speaking out against lies about people's drug tests, blood work. You're doing their blood work wrong and you're lying to them. Someone wants to come out and say it instead of them being a whistleblower as they should be. What do? What does Elizabeth Holmes do? She uses every legal remedy she has to force them to shut up. You're an employee. How much money do you have compared to your company who has access to venture capitalists who are paying? If you're the venture capitalists who funded Theranos, you paid for these people to be persecuted by those lawyers. Every legal action taken against an employee should be reviewed. Every legal action taken against citizens of this country should be looked at. Instead, prosecutors have free rein and they have unlimited resources. They want to come after you to prove their case against you. They have the police. They can hire investigators. They hire expert witnesses, all to testify against you. For you to mount the defense, you have to pay for all of those things. Now, if you don't have money, how do you pay for all of those things? You can't. So you don't get them. What if every dollar spent by a prosecutor in a case, an equal amount of money had to be given to the person on the defense side to defend themselves? And because we have all of these laws against morality, and because everyone justifies that they're good laws, that they're just laws, then officers can rationalize planting evidence. Well, we knew they were guilty. We didn't have the evidence required to convict them. So we lied a little bit here and plant a little bit of evidence there. It happens. And this is why we end up with the blue shield. Because it's happened. Because it's there. And not all police are bad, but they get stuck in with the other ones. They didn't make training day because that never, ever, ever happens. We're going to go do a drug raid where there's millions of dollars. No cops ever take any money. There are plenty of good, honest cops. The problem is there's so many, and we've had these problems for so long that those that have been there for a long time have all probably done something or been a part of something. And those who come in and think they're going to change the system, no, you get kicked out. The blue shield exists to protect everyone from all the previous bad things that they've done. And everyone's done some bad things because it's a dirty business. And I think we give cops way too many responsibilities because we're asking them to enforce laws against morality, which are impossible. And just like in the 1920s, prohibition didn't work, just like it hasn't worked so far, right? We don't see less drug use because the laws are illegal. No. Nobody cares, right? The only thing we see is more people caught up in the criminal justice system. So we've got more police than we need. We've got less social services because we don't treat drug use as a social problem, which it really is, right? We don't have counseling services available to people. We've eliminated a lot of psychiatric care. Even for our veterans, we do a terrible job of taking care of our veterans. Not only that, we've made the drugs that could help them illegal. And one of the things in making all the drugs illegal that we did is we took away the research on drugs. Oh, a nice handout to the pharmaceutical companies, because now we can get addicted to the other prescription drugs. Why have psilocybin in low dose potential that grows out of the ground for free when we can put you on antidepressants for the rest of your life? Put you on antipsychotics right after that. If you look at how much we spend on drugs in this country, then we're talking about fighting the drug war and what drugs are legal and what are not. Okay, what's good for PTSD? We have soldiers coming back from Iraq with terrible experiences, watching their friends have limbs blown off, die in front of them. Same thing in Afghanistan. What do we got for them? You have stress. We realize this. We have no help for you. Traumatic brain injuries. We got nothing for you. Because we've made all the drugs that might be able to help you illegal. Turns out MDMA, very useful for PTSD. Only because of our soldiers and the fact that we've been in a useless war for 20 years is the reason that those aren't legal. Or starting to actually potentially become legal. But our stupid drug laws don't allow for any of this. So we're not seeing all the useful things of plants that grow out of nature that maybe they are symbiotic with us, just like marijuana. As shown, this has been used for thousands of years. Why aren't the other ones? What's to believe that psilocybin hasn't? How come everyone wants to go down to Peru and work with shaman who have been using ayahuasca for thousands of years as well to help people? These are tools that have been taken away from us. So instead, we can't treat our soldiers. And instead, what do they tell us? So if you don't agree with laws against morality, then you're anti-cop. I'm not anti-cop. I want police. But what I want police doing is much different than what they are doing. They're focused on all the wrong things. I want police, and this is part of the defunding that they're talking about, which actually makes some sense. Let's give police less responsibility. Let's have less of them. We want police for violent crimes. We don't want police for drug laws. All right? We want police to protect us, not to harass us because they smell weed, not to come over and bother us because we happen to be smoking some weed. No. That's not what we need. We don't need all of this. And all of this has done is escalate violence. Because if I'm selling weed and weed is illegal, then I can't go to the police when someone comes to try and steal my money or my weed. So what do I got to do? I got to shoot them. And what happens when somebody doesn't pay? Now we start chopping heads off. Oh, that's not dramatic enough. So we have to go kill your entire family. And this is the escalation of the drug war. And we've taken our gangs from prison and exported them to other countries where they understand this. And they are fighting those wars there as well. So Central America is a disaster and everyone was trying to come to America, and the actual immigration problem that we see as a problem, Trump wants to build a wall to prevent the immigrants from getting in. The immigrants want in because they're trying to get out of a drug war of which we are the cause of. If cocaine was not illegal, do you really think that we would have synthesized cocaine all over the place? Or maybe we'd have some coca leaves and we'd have some tea that would be an alternative to coffee that might actually help, especially high altitude. Good for altitude sickness, used in Peru all the time, but instead completely illegal here. So we are going to continue to ban things that grow out of the ground. And we think this is rational? It's irrational. Meanwhile, we continue to prescribe opioids at an alarming rate. Oh, we've backed off a little. Oh, we're Purdue Pharma settling and giving the states billions. Is that money going to go to the people who got addicted from them? No, of course not. Just like with all the other financial crimes that we do. We haven't gotten into that yet. Let's talk about the financial crimes against the poor. Oh, that's right. From JP Morgan to MetLife to American Honda Finance, Toyota Finance, Countrywide Financial, now owned by Bank of America, all settled huge cases for discrimination. And you know what they do? They charge poor people higher interest rates and more fees on their loans than they do other people. Why? Because they can. Instead of earning an honest living, they extort the most vulnerable, the people without an education. And we can talk about education dollars. So what do? We know now that we've put black communities separate. Oh, you can't sell them a house. It's an unwritten rule. Or in the South, under Jim Crow laws, it was a written rule. You cannot live in certain places of town. We know we did these things. So we segregated society. American laws segregated society. Inside of that segregation is classism. Again, classism. Poor white people are just as affected by all of these things. It just so happens that on a proportion, the portion of brown and black people that are poor is much higher than the rest of us. The rest of us, therefore, end up with opportunity where they don't because of the color of our skin. And we have to acknowledge this and accept this. And it's a rough go. One area in my life where that was not the case, where it was reversed, and I got to see firsthand how it feels like to be on the other side of the fence, was playing basketball. Where all of a sudden being white was not looked at as a good thing. You were considered... Racism can exist in many, many forms, some of which may work out good for you. For example, coaches were racist. They thought the black players, just because they were black, were more athletic. That's not really true. Athleticism does not run by race. There are plenty of awkward, nerdy black people, just as there are plenty of awkward, nerdy white people. As a percentage, athleticism on the whole probably balances out pretty well. Just is what it is. It's the same thing with intelligence. So then we think the opposite. So when it comes to athleticism, and this was a belief of the Nazi Party. Oh, the black athleticism makes American exceptional for athletes. No. But athletes in America are predominantly people of color because that's the greatest opportunity they have to change their circumstances. So that's what they try the hardest at, and that's the story that's been told to them of the way out. It's either that or hip-hop. And hip-hop artists and athletes talk about it all the time. This is nothing new. But when it came to basketball, all of a sudden, I felt racism on the other side. From both players and coaches. What are you doing, skinny white kid out here trying to hoop? Move it along. So you felt it a little bit. It didn't feel good. And then you start becoming friends with everyone that you play with, and you realize we're all the same. We're all people. And that's no more fair that I'm subjected to that racism as it is that they are in plenty of other areas. So the racist in us says that, oh, white people are smarter. Not true. Not true at all. Just like the athleticism is not true. So we have to come to terms, all these things aren't true. But our circumstances and the opportunities available to us are very different. So we could talk about schools. We have separated communities now, which means schools are funded by local tax dollars. Well, if we're forcing people into communities that are poor, then there's going to be less tax dollars for the schools. We could fix that immediately. We could say every kid in the state gets the same amount of money regardless. Period. We're going to spend the same on every student. Therefore, your one county collects extra money because their residents have more money. Great. It subsidizes the other schools until we're equaled out. Every student should have the same opportunity, but that's not the way that it works. In poor communities, they pay the teachers less, they have less money for the budgets for the schools, and the schools are way worse. We all know that this is true. In Denver, this is 100% true. Denver public schools are horrible. Everyone moves to the suburbs once they have kids, if they can afford it. They don't send their kids to Denver public schools unless they have to. It's just what happens. So we've got schools. So kids don't get the same opportunity. Then without this education, we're going to take advantage of them financially. Then we've got the legal system set up to not treat people the same. And again, if you can't afford your way out of the system, you're stuck in the system. Can't afford bail, you sit in jail. Can't afford a defense team, you plead guilty. Even if you might not be in it, even if you might not be guilty. And then what are you guilty of? You're guilty of doing what? Giving people drugs? 81% of people went to get drugs from a drug dealer in 2012. It just so happened that drug dealer was a legal pharmacy. But these are opioids, which is the same as heroin. And again, when I say I'm for legalization of drugs, that does not mean I want everyone to have access to PCP and anything else. But let's look at that. So PCP makes people go a little crazy, right? Oh, but wait a minute. We have people on antidepressants and antipsychotics at a crazy, crazy rate. So, what about those? What about all those drugs? Oh yeah, and by the way, you know those shooters that we have that keep wandering in and shooting places up? Guess what? Most of them attached to antipsychotics. This is from the United States, increasing off-label use of antipsychotic medications in the United States. Okay? This is what happens. So this is legal use of drugs. Legal use of drugs is, we'll give you antidepressants. Those aren't really working for you. Well, try this. What is it? Oh, it's an antipsychotic. Let's look at antipsychotic drug uses. This would be the equivalent of giving people PCP all the time. Okay, so PCP is illegal, but antipsychotic drugs are legal. Okay, so we went from 6.2 million in 1995 to 16.7 million in 2006. I guarantee you, I think I heard on Joe Rogan's podcast that antipsychotics are like the fourth most paid for drug by Medicare. This is the conclusion of this report from a decade ago. Atypical use has grown far beyond substitution for now infrequently used typical agents. Antipsychotics are increasingly used for conditions where FDA approval and associated clinical evidence is less certain. Despite the value of innovation, the benefits of widening atypical antipsychotic use should be weighed against their cost, regulatory status, and incomplete nature of available evidence. That is a government speak weighing to say we should not be using antipsychotics for off-label use, but we do. Doctors prescribe them every day. Most of the shooters who have shot people in America on mass shootings are on antipsychotics, not because they should be, because it's easier than actually treating the person. And we stopped treating the person in America. So what can we do about all of these things? These are the systemic things that lead to overall systemic racism, right? Our court system is not fair. We don't have justice in America. We have injustice. If you cannot afford your lawyers, if you cannot afford your defense, if you cannot afford to go collect evidence to prove your innocence, meanwhile, the state has all of the resources they want at their disposal. Why don't we equalize that? State spends dollars, we spend dollars. And again, this is not a partisan issue. Republicans started the war on drugs, elevated it. Clinton doubled down, more police, 3 strikes rule, all sorts of terrible things. Didn't fix anything. My biggest disappointment under President Obama was that he did not fix anything when it comes to drug reform and prison reform. All of these things that actually need to be fixed, he did not really address. He visited a prison. He didn't keep a whole lot of black people out of them. I look at who we're talking about for president right now and vice president. Biden was part of Clinton's campaign to make it really hard. This tough on crime makes sense only if we're talking about crimes we all agree should be crimes. We don't throw people in jail because they're 10 miles over the speed limit. We've decided that's a crime, but it's just one that we're going to charge you a fee for. But it's the same thing. We've made everyone a criminal by creating speed limits, especially when they're 55 miles an hour under this conserve gas nonsense kind of thing. If, let's just say the speed limit is 75 and that's the max speed limit in the country, then why the hell do you make a car that'll go 120? Why is that legal? NASCAR has restrictor plates on their cars so they can only go so fast in races. Why don't we have restrictor plates on all cars in America so they can only go so fast? We don't do that, but we want to enforce people can't smoke weed. People can't do all sorts of things that we've decided because they're morally apprehensible. And what does that mean? We have more organized crime and more violence in our communities, which is the last thing we want. Now if we say we want police to do their job, which we do, and I do support the police. This is the same stupid argument that we end up with as support the troops. Support the troops does not mean I support the war. I did not support the war in Iraq. I did not support the war in Afghanistan. Still going on, by the way. 20 years we've been in this war. Why? I support every single troop that's been sent over there. I do not support the war. Those are 2 separate things, and we need to do the same thing. And this is what our politicians do. They bring it all back. And we think that, one's good, one's bad. Oh, really? Kamala Harris could be a vice presidential candidate. You know what she wanted to do? Arrest parents if their students were truant from school. How's that help solve the problem? Put more people in jail? Is this still our solution? These are not solutions. These are not our solutions. Shame on you for wanting to put more people in jail for things that should not be crimes. Our government should not get to tell us everything we need to know and want to do. It is terrible, and they continue to do so. So, go to fact check, figure it out. But this is not a partisan issue. It's both sides, it's a problem. And both sides need to come together to fix this. But here's the thing that I think. The only way this gets fixed, we got to get rid of old people. Way too many old people in Washington. The swamp is old people. So just like the cops have the blue shield, where a lot of them did shit that they shouldn't have done, they don't want that to get brought out. They need that shield to stay up so they don't have to go back and recall those memories of when they did something they shouldn't do. And all of a sudden, potentially everything's out in the open. So does every single person in Washington that's been there for a few years. They took money from people they shouldn't have taken money to. They made money off of things they shouldn't have made money on. I came from Nevada, grew up there, middle years. And the guy who used to run the Senate before Dirty Mitch is in there came from Nevada, Harry Reid. Harry Reid went into Congress, not worth very much money. By the time he came out, multimillionaire. He's worth 35, 40 million now. He didn't make that off his government salary. He made that off of things he knew was going to happen. Inside information. That should be insider trading. He should be in jail for that. And he doesn't want to go to jail for that. And all these old people who did all these bad things, Biden included, don't want to admit that these were bad things. They don't want to admit that we need to change the laws. But we do. We definitely do. Because the laws are what's going to allow systemic racism to continue. So, how are we going to prevent that? What else can we do? We have to educate our friends and families and our communities on the facts of how this works, how drug arrests work, who's being arrested for drugs. Did anyone from the Sackler family go to jail? No. They sold more drugs than El Chapo. 100%. Not only that, they intentionally lied about their addictiveness, and they spent billions of dollars giving money to doctors to help them prescribe more of them, telling them this is what's good for America. It's right here from the CDC tells you. Are you kidding? It even says in 2018, the prescription rate has fallen to the lowest in 13 years. In that case, only 1 out of every 2 Americans got some opioids last year. We are a drug-infested country. Let's not pretend that we're not. So why have one legal and one illegal? All you do is create a black market. You create organized crime. This makes no sense. Let's treat this as the social problem that it is. Let's offer people some help. Let's give them a way out. Let's help them get off the drugs that we got them addicted to, instead of treating them like criminals for getting addicted to a substance of which we gave them. That's crazy. And if we legalize drugs, then guess what? Well, everyone's going to be selling them on the street still? Probably not. No, not anymore, because now they're all available. If you want them, go get them. Buy them legally. Tax it. Take that tax money. Put that into programs. The problem in America is we love to tax, just like tobacco tax. We tax the crap out of everybody on tobacco. 10, 12, 15 bucks a pack. We don't care. Just keep raising the price. Now, do we take any of that money that we took supposedly because we know that this is bad for society and actually put it back to create a fund for the people so when they're sick, older, that they have money because we taxed them? No. We spent that. We spend that on whatever we want. So what else are we really going to do? We got to educate our friends and family that the drug war is long since lost, and it's a war against our own people, and it makes no sense and allows systemic racism to thrive. We could stop electing prosecutors immediately who are trying to put people in jail for use of drugs. Use of drugs should not be a crime, especially if it didn't affect anybody else. Who's the victim? If I go get some psilocybin mushrooms, which are illegal, and I take them, and I go out in the forest, and I have a trip, and I sleep in a tent that night, and I wake up tomorrow sober and drive back home, I've committed a crime. Who's been harmed? Who's the harmed party? This is the problem. It's the same thing. Prostitution's illegal because we don't like it from a moral standpoint. But what's worse? A woman having consenting sex with a man who paid for it, or human trafficking, where now she doesn't have a say. What's worse? A prostitute who has the option to go to the police when someone beats her, or one who can't, and in fact is forced to have a pimp to protect her? We know what's worse. Allow adults to be adults. Consenting adults can agree to whatever they want to. If there's no victim, there's no harmed party. We should not be prosecuting people, putting people in jail for nonsense. So what can we do? Kara, here's what I got for you. Our job now, if you're the woke person, if you've read and understand that this is a problem, systemic racism exists, we acknowledge that. Our job is to educate our family members, our friends, our community on the things that cause systemic racism and try and vote out these people. All of the old people in Washington need to go because old people don't like change. Old people aren't signing up for it. So what are they going to do? Oh, we're going to create a law where you no longer know how to put a knee on a neck. That's not solving anything. That does not prevent the systemic racism from continuing. That is not going to shrink our prison systems. That is not going, and make no mistake, if you want to know where racism exists the most in the United States, it's inside the prison system. I guarantee you, it's probably 100 to 1 on where swastika tattoos get tattooed on people. In prison. White supremacy groups thrive in prisons. Why? Because prisons are race related. And then we'd like to believe that once somebody leaves prison, they've walked away from it. You're no longer attached to that life of crime. You've paid your time and you're no longer attached to them. Please. The gangs in prison run stuff on the inside and the outside. Now they know you. Now they own you. They can make you do all sorts of things to want to protect your family. And they will go after your family. Those are the things I want the police to be involved in. Extortion. Not putting people in jail for drug use and distribution. If we're going to do that, we have lots of pharmaceutical representatives in the United States that we could easily start lining up to put in jail. People need to get educated that this is the way the system works, that we do not have a justice system in America, that you are not afforded real representation to defend yourself. The Ferguson riots were completely about this. Tons of police activity, everybody getting tickets, everybody forced into the court system, and nobody given the legal resources to really defend themselves, understand the charges, and stop the harassment by the police there. If we want to change things, we have to change the underlying laws around them. This is the only way that this changes. We have to change the financial consequences. How come all of these companies did atrocious financial crimes against people, which could have destroyed their lives? That could have led to a higher interest rate, could lead to you losing your home because you don't have enough money to save. It means you're going to have less money in retirement because you paid more interest to somebody else and didn't have as much money to invest. It may mean you had fewer opportunities in your life. So somebody does that to somebody, nobody in any of those financial things would even own up to the fact that they actually did it when the statistics completely support it. The evidence against them was overwhelming in most of the cases. We don't do education in poorer communities. So how are they supposed to understand their credit score to get it better? How are they supposed to understand how the financial system works? And then we're going to take advantage of them even more, charge them higher in fees and interest rates than we could or should. Yeah, that happens. That affects people's lives. Who went to jail for those things? Nobody. But there's a lot of people in jail on some trumped up bullshit marijuana charges. Our job is to educate our families, our communities, our friends, everyone that we know that this is real and it exists. I've been having these conversations since I got out of college because I felt it. I was on the other side of it when it came to basketball. On the rest of everything, I watched my friends that I developed in college deal with racism constantly, not getting the same opportunities. And the problem in having this discussion all along for the last 20 years has been trying to get over the fact that, hey, a lot of the people who do have businesses who are white have also worked their ass off. It's not taking anything away from any of you. You've done your work, but you have other work to do to make sure that it's fair around you, to make sure that everyone has access to an actual legal defense when they are confronted with crimes. And understanding that if you cannot afford one right now, that means there is not justice for all. 100% not. We need to have that. So we need to educate everybody that these things need to change. You should be more afraid of legal drug use in America, where 1 out of 2 people last year got an opioid prescription, than you should be about it being illegal on the street. Because you know why people are on it on the street? because they got off of it, because they got cut off on the legal? What about all of our soldiers who could be helped from these drugs? We need to completely destroy these drug laws and these laws against morality because they all are a slippery slope to systemic racism because of how they're enforced. And we've seen that the police are people and they're going to get involved in it. How could they not? Just like if you're a farmer in Colombia and I come in and I go, we'd really prefer you not grow coca leaves. Yeah, okay. What can I grow? How about you grow corn? All right. How much do I make growing corn? Oh, you'll make about $15,000 a year growing corn. Okay. How much would I make growing cocaine? Do I make growing coca leaves? Oh, you make about $150,000 a year. Is that a decision for that farmer? Of course it's not. Just like it's not a decision for a lot of people. You know why so many people deal drugs in America? Because there's a lot of money in it. And I'm not just talking about street drugs and it being illegal. I'm talking about pharmaceutical drugs and getting 50% of Americans to end up with a prescription. How come we're not arresting doctors for drug dealing? No. Street corner boys. Come on. Our job is to open everyone's eyes to how this really works. That drug laws and laws of morality, you don't have to agree that somebody should or shouldn't do something to agree that they should or shouldn't have the right to do it. Those are two different things. No one's forcing you. We could legalize prostitution. I'm not forcing you to use a prostitute. I will not use a prostitute in America. Okay? I'm not going to do it, but I don't think it should be illegal. I think it should be done in certain places because that's the only way to reduce human trafficking. I don't think drugs should be illegal. I think they should be legal because it's the only way to get rid of organized crime around drugs. You will not get rid of cartels in Mexico ever until drugs are legal. Period. We need to spend the same amount of money on education for everyone. If we really want to grow up and believe that everyone in America has the same opportunity for the American dream, then we have to spend the same amount of money on everyone for childhood education. We have to. It's the only answer. We have to make the court systems fair, where people have a right to representation. We have to make it so that bail laws make sense based on the crime committed. We have to understand that doing drugs is a whole lot different and not something you should realistically be put in jail for. How many people do we put in jail for using alcohol? For drinking? Just drinking. Very, very few. Driving drunk? A few, but then we let them out the next day. We could do the same thing with drugs, right? Yeah, you're driving under the influence, right? And then what? Oh, from the effects, right? And what are the effects of alcohol that we have on society? If you took two different households and one guy drank and one guy smoked weed and they only did those particular things, which one do you think would be more likely to abuse his wife or children? I'm going to go out on a crazy limb here and just go, I tell you what, the alcoholic's much more likely to be abusive. Straight up. So, we don't put people in jail until they actually hit somebody. Let's wait for that on the drug use end too. Let's wait till there's actually a victim to the crime and then worry about that and have the police enforce physical violence on people who impose physical violence only. Police should be concerned with policing crimes that are physical in nature. We need to prevent murder, rape. We need to find rapists. We need to find murderers. We need to prevent domestic violence. Those are the things that police should be focused on. We need to protect property so that people are safe in their homes. I'm not anti-cop. I'm anti-cops and drug wars against our own people. I'm 100% for police protecting us. And most policemen that I know agree with that statement 100% because they know that it's a revolving door and the drug war's over and it could never be won. The only people who aren't on board with that are some of the DEA agents because you don't need a drug enforcement agency if there's not illegal drugs. Now, we could turn that drug enforcement agency onto our own pharmaceutical companies and see where they pan out. But nobody's going to do that because that's political suicide, because those people got the people elected. Kamala Harris, how much money are you getting from pharmaceutical companies? How much money are you getting from the police department to arrest people? Are you kidding? Arresting parents? We need to change the attitude of the district attorney. It's not win at all costs. We shouldn't have the most aggressive people be district attorneys who never want to lose. That's not justice. That's terrible. It's terrible for all of us. That's not what we need. But what we do need, and what we can do, and what I hope this message helps doing, is we need to educate our friends, our families, and our communities that systemic racism is real. We need to show them the facts. We need to show them how these things work, and we need to change the underlying laws. And to do so, we need to vote in new people. Don't vote for anyone over 60. Just make it a rule. Who cares? Cross all your partisan lines. They don't matter. Again, Democrats have been no better at helping poor people than Republicans have been. They're all horrible on it. We need to repeal these laws of morality. We need to spend the same amount of money on education systems. We need to make sure that people have an ability to defend themselves the way that we would believe that it should be, and the way that we would want it to be if charges were brought against us. We need to treat people equally. And the only way we're going to get there is by changing the cause of the problem, which is the laws, and not be so concerned with the symptoms. Not that putting your knee on somebody's neck is not a problem. Absolutely it is. 100% a problem. But changing that rule does not change the underlying conditions. That does not give people hope and opportunity. It just means that's one less thing police will do. Oh, strangleholds are out. Tasers are in. Let's tase them. We've seen this. We've seen the bad police come right out and drag people into the street and beat them for no reason. Pepper spray them without provocation, simply for asking a question, in any way, shape, or form challenging your authority. We didn't give the police that authority, and they shouldn't have it. Transparency is also very important, and we could go a lot further with that too. Body cameras have helped a little bit. Cell phones in a society have helped a lot more. So if you see something, record it. If we see brutality, maybe every time a police officer pulls somebody over, we should have 3 cars pull up next to them and all just sit there and record it. And go, oh, how was that transaction? Maybe if that happened everywhere across the country, whether it's a traffic stop or somebody get arrested at their house, if every time there's a police involvement, people are recording it with their phones and there's witnesses to every action, maybe then we could create some change short term. So maybe that's what we are all prescribed to do. You think the police are going to like that? No. And if you're the only one who pulls over, I'm sure the police will treat you terribly. Great, record it. Now we'll know who the bad police are. If you're good police, you won't be worried about it. Hey, citizens exercising their right to see what's going on in society and see how everyone else is being treated. Sounds good. Let's do that everywhere. Let's let everybody do that and not just do it for people who look like us. Do it for anybody. Call out injustice wherever it is, at whatever level, whether it's financial, criminal justice system, or otherwise. Call it out all over the place. Let's stop prosecuting our brothers and sisters for crimes that do not justify jail time. Let's stop pretending that jail does anybody any good. In America, we have longer sentences, worse outcomes, and a huge recidivism rate. We're not helping people get out. And once they do get out, we don't act like they did their time. Instead, we act like no one should ever get hired again. It's terrible. So what can we do? We can educate. And we can vote. But your job, if you're white and need the question of what else, educate. Educate all your friends and family. Have the difficult conversations. Don't let them off the hook with they don't want to talk about it. They don't believe that this, because they don't see it in front of themselves, that it's real. Know that it's real. Do something about it. Talk about it constantly. And hopefully, we can change some of these real problems and not just address the symptoms. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.